My husband introduced me as his biatch to his friends for years. Last week, he found out I'm not his anything anymore. The first time it happened was 3 months into our marriage. We were at a barbecue at his coworker's house, and I walked over to bring him a drink. He threw his arm around me and said to the group, "This is my bitch. Isn't she pretty?" Everyone laughed. I stood there frozen, not sure if I'd heard him right. On the drive home, I asked him about it. He said it was just guy talk, that I was being way too sensitive, that his friends' wives didn't get upset over little jokes like this. He made me feel like I was the problem for being bothered, so I let it go. But it kept happening. At his friend's birthday party, at the neighborhood block party, at his company's holiday dinner. Every time he introduced me to someone new or called me over to a group, it was the same thing. My bitch this, my bitch that. Sometimes he'd mix it up and say my little bitch or my pretty bitch, like adding an adjective made it better. His friends would laugh or nod along. A few of their wives would give me these looks, half pity and half relief that it wasn't them. I brought it up again after the holiday dinner. Told him it was humiliating, that I was his wife and deserved to be introduced as such. He rolled his eyes and said I needed to relax, that it was a term of endearment, that he was showing me off, not putting me down. When I kept pushing, he got annoyed and asked if I wanted him to stop talking about me altogether. Like those were the only two options: complete degradation or complete silence. I started avoiding his social events, made excuses about headaches and work deadlines and not feeling well. He didn't seem to care at first, just went without me. But then his friends started asking where I was. Their wives would mention they hadn't seen me in a while. His boss's wife specifically asked if everything was okay at home. That's when he got angry. He said I was making him look bad, that people were starting to think there was something wrong with our marriage. I told him there was something wrong with our marriage. He called me overdramatic. We'd been married 4 years at this point. 4 years of being introduced as his property, his possession, his bitch. I'd stopped going to his work functions entirely. Stopped attending parties with his friend group. He'd complain about having to explain my absence, but never once considered that the solution was to just stop degrading me in public. His mother came to visit about a year ago. We were all having dinner when his friend called, and he put it on speaker to show his mom how popular he was or something. His friend asked if his bitch was cooking dinner. He laughed and said, "Yeah, she's earning her keep tonight." He said this in front of his mother, in front of me. His mom looked uncomfortable but didn't say anything. After dinner, I found her in the kitchen and asked if she thought it was normal for a man to talk about his wife that way. She sighed and said her son had always had a crude sense of humor, that I shouldn't take it personally. Shouldn't take it personally, like it wasn't specifically designed to diminish me. I realized then that no one was going to stand up for me. Not his friends, not his family, not even him. If I wanted it to stop, I had to be the one to stop it. I started putting money aside. Not a lot, just what I could manage without him noticing. I reconnected with friends I'd drifted away from during the marriage. Started seeing a therapist who helped me understand that what I'd been accepting as normal was actually a pattern of disrespect that had eroded my sense of self. I spent 8 months getting ready, found an apartment, secured a job with better hours, told my family what had been going on, and my sister offered to help me move when the time came. He noticed nothing. He was too busy with his friends and his jokes and his ego to realize his wife was planning her exit. The night I left, he was out at a poker game. I packed everything that mattered to me, which turned out to be less than I expected. Left my rings on the kitchen counter with a note that said I was done being his bitch. My sister helped me load the car, and I was gone before he got home. He called 11 times that night. Left voicemails that cycled through confusion, anger, and bargaining. Kept asking what he did wrong, like he genuinely didn't know. His friends reached out over the following weeks. The divorce took 5 months. He fought it at first. Kept saying we could work things out, that he'd change. I asked him what specifically he'd change. He couldn't give me a straight answer. Just kept saying he'd be better, he'd try harder. Never once acknowledged the actual problem. Never once said he'd stop calling me degrading names. In mediation, he actually tried to argue that I was being unreasonable, that plenty of couples had pet names and inside jokes. The mediator, a woman in her 60s, looked at him and asked if he'd be comfortable being introduced to strangers as his wife's bitch. He went quiet. The mediator waited for an answer, but he just sat there staring at the table. I watched him realize he had no defense, no way to spin this that made him look reasonable. We signed the papers 2 weeks later. The divorce was final by March. I found the roses on my doorstep 3 days after the papers were signed. They were massive. At least 2 dozen red roses in a crystal vase with a card that said he was sorry and he wanted to talk. I stood there looking at them for a long time, feeling nothing. The petals were already turning brown at the edges from sitting in the heat. I picked up the vase, carried it inside, and set it on the kitchen counter. Then I went about my day like they weren't there. 3 days later, they were completely dead, petals falling onto the counter in a brown mess. I threw the whole thing in the dumpster outside my apartment building without reading the card again. Joel started texting on day 4. The first message said he missed me. The second said he didn't understand why I was being so cold. By day 7, he'd sent 17 texts, each one a different version of confusion and hurt. He kept saying he didn't see this coming, that we could fix things if I'd just talk to him. I read every message with the same flat feeling. like I was reading about someone else's life. None of it touched me. On day 8, my phone rang at 2 in the morning. Joel's name lit up the screen. I reached over, silenced it, and went back to sleep. Going back to work felt like putting on a costume. I smiled at patients, checked vitals, administered medications, and pretended everything was normal. But the hospital's chaos was actually a relief. I threw myself into 12-hour shifts, volunteered for extra rotations, and focused on patient care with an intensity that kept me from thinking. My coworker Naomi noticed. She'd catch me in the hallway between rooms or in the supply closet restocking, and she'd give me these looks like she knew something was wrong. But she didn't push. She just started bringing me coffee during our breaks, setting it down next to me without saying anything. One afternoon, during a rare quiet moment in the break room, Naomi sat down across from me. She asked if I was okay. Something about the way she said it, genuine and concerned without being nosy, cracked something in me. I told her about the divorce in clinical terms, like I was describing a patient's condition rather than my own life. I said my marriage ended, the papers were signed, and I was adjusting. She listened without judgment, just nodding occasionally. Then she told me she left a 7-year relationship last year. Said it took her months to feel normal again. I felt less alone than I had in weeks. The next Tuesday, I was in the middle of changing an IV when my charge nurse found me. She said security called from the lobby. My ex-boyfriend was downstairs asking for me. He had flowers. I felt my hands start shaking. The humiliation of my personal mess spilling into my professional space made my face hot. I told her I didn't want to see him. She nodded and said she'd handle it. I finished the IV, but my hands kept trembling. I excused myself and went to the bathroom where I stood at the sink trying to breathe normally. During my lunch break, I sat in my car in the parking garage and finally let myself feel furious. I pulled out my phone and blocked Joel's number, deleted our text thread, and blocked him on every social media platform. The relief was immediate and overwhelming, but it was mixed with unexpected sadness that it came to this. That the man I married for better or worse couldn't respect a simple boundary. I drove home that night feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. Our mutual friends started reaching out the following week. Some were clearly fishing for details, asking vague questions about how I was doing and if Joel and I were really done. Others seemed genuinely concerned. I realized we had overlapping social circles from 5 years together. People were starting to choose sides. 2 friends stopped inviting me to group events. I'd see the photos on social media later. Everyone gathered at someone's house for game night or dinner, and I wasn't there. The isolation stung more than I expected. 3 weeks after the divorce, Joel's friend Marco called me. He said Joel asked him to check on me because he was worried. I recognized the manipulation immediately. I told Marco that Joel could be worried on his own time and I didn't need checking on. Marco sounded uncomfortable. He admitted Joel had been talking about me constantly, telling everyone I left without warning, and he didn't know what he did wrong. Hearing that felt like another violation of my privacy. I told Marco not to call me again and hung up. I ran into Becca at the grocery store the next weekend. She was in the produce section when I turned the corner with my cart. Her face did this awkward thing where she clearly wanted to avoid me, but it was too late. She said hi and asked how I was doing. Then she mentioned, like she was doing me a favor, that Joel told everyone I overreacted to a minor issue, that he tried to work things out but I wouldn't listen. Hearing that he was rewriting our history to make himself the victim made something hot and angry rise in my chest. I told Becca the truth. I told her about the years of being called his bitch in public, about the humiliation, about his refusal to stop even when I begged. I watched her face change as she realized Joel's version didn't match reality. She mumbled something about being sorry and practically ran away from me. Naomi convinced me to come to her book club's social night the following Thursday. She said it would be good for me to get out, that I'd been isolating too much. I almost said no. It would be my first social outing without Joel in 5 years. But something made me agree. I showed up at the wine bar feeling awkward and out of place. Everyone else seemed paired off or comfortable in groups. I was hyper-aware of being alone. But Naomi stayed close, introducing me to people and pulling me into conversations. Someone told a story about their disastrous first apartment, and I laughed. Actually laughed. I stayed for 2 hours, and when I left, I felt like I'd won something small but important. I pushed my cart down the grocery store aisle 2 weeks later, trying to remember if I need milk or already bought some. The fluorescent lights make everything look washed out, and I'm mentally running through my fridge contents when I turn the corner by the dairy section. My cart nearly slams into another one, and I jerk back, muttering an apology before I look up and see Joel's mother standing there. Her face does this complicated thing where surprise shifts into delight, and she reaches out to touch my arm. She tells me how wonderful it is to run into me, that she's been thinking about me so much lately. I freeze with my hands still gripping the cart handle. She launches into how Joel has been so down, how he really misses me, how she knows young couples go through rough patches but love always finds a way. The words pour out of her in this cheerful stream, and I can feel my chest getting tight. Part of me wants to tell her everything, to explain exactly why her son and I aren't together anymore, but another part feels weirdly guilty, like I'm the one who failed somehow. She keeps talking about how marriage takes work and compromise, squeezing my arm like we're in this together. I managed to say something vague about how things are complicated, my voice coming out smaller than I want it to. She nods like she understands, but then says she's sure we can work it out, that Joel is a good man who just needs patience. The defensive anger rises up sharp and hot, but I swallow it down because what's the point of arguing with her in the middle of the grocery store? I mumble something about needing to finish shopping, and she finally lets go of my arm, telling me to take care and call Joel soon. I practically run my cart down the next aisle, abandoning half my shopping list just to get away from her. In my car, I sit gripping the steering wheel and shaking, equal parts furious and guilty and exhausted. That night, I can't sleep, lying in bed staring at the ceiling and replaying the conversation with Joel's mother over and over. Around 2 a.m, I give up and get out of bed, pulling out a notebook from my desk drawer. I start writing a letter to Joel that I know I'll never send, my hand moving fast across the page. The words pour out, everything I couldn't say during our relationship and everything I still can't say now. I write about feeling invisible while he gave pieces of himself to everyone else, about watching him hand out flowers to his mother and Becca and Mila while I got nothing. I write about my grandmother's funeral and how he couldn't be bothered to comfort me, about all the times I needed him and he wasn't there. The roses he brought after the breakup get a whole paragraph, about how they proved he was always capable of the gesture, but just never thought I was worth it. My hand cramps and I keep writing, filling page after page with 5 years of swallowed words and unmet needs. When I finally finish, the sky outside is starting to lighten, and my eyes burn with tiredness. I fold the letter carefully and put it in the bottom drawer of my desk, under some old tax documents where I'll never accidentally see it. Something about writing it all down makes my chest feel less tight, like I've released pressure I didn't know I was carrying. 3 months crawl by and I'm starting to feel almost normal again. I go to work, hang out with Naomi, avoid places where I might run into Joel. Then one Tuesday morning, I open my email and there's a message from him, the subject line just saying, "I'm sorry." My finger hovers over the delete button, but I can't make myself press it. I open the email and it's long, several paragraphs of him apologizing for not seeing how his actions hurt me. He writes about starting therapy and realizing he took me for granted, about understanding now that the flowers weren't just about flowers, but about feeling valued. The words are careful and thoughtful, hitting every point I would have wanted him to understand during our relationship. He says he's been working on himself and wants a chance to prove he's changed, that he knows he doesn't deserve it, but he's asking anyway. I read the email 4 times, each time feeling hope flicker in my chest despite knowing better. Part of me wants to believe that people can change, that therapy actually worked for him, that maybe we could try again and it would be different. I close my laptop and walk away, but 10 minutes later I'm reading it again, analyzing every word for sincerity. I forward the email to Naomi with a message asking what she thinks, hating myself for needing someone else's permission to feel hopeful. My phone rings 15 minutes later and I answer knowing it's her. She doesn't text back because this is too important for texting. Her voice is gentle when she points out that Joel only started therapy after losing me, not because he genuinely wanted to change for himself. She says the timing matters, that real growth comes from internal motivation, not external consequences. I sit on my couch listening to her talk and feeling each word land like a small wound, because they're true. She asks if I really think he's changed or if I just want him to have changed, and I don't have a good answer. We talk for almost an hour, and by the end I feel clearer but sadder, understanding that wanting something doesn't make it real. After we hang up, I read Joel's email one more time and then archive it. Not deleting it, but moving it out of sight. But the email sits in my archived folder like a weight, and 3 days later I find myself typing a response. I tell Joel I'll meet him for coffee to talk. Just to talk. Adding that qualifier like it will protect me. I tell myself it's for closure, that I need to hear him say these things in person to really believe them or really let go. The week before we're supposed to meet is torture. I'm anxious and second-guessing constantly, running through conversations in my head and trying to prepare for every possibility. The morning of the meeting, I try on 5 different outfits, changing between casual and slightly dressy, wanting to look good but not like I tried too hard. I settle on jeans and a sweater that Naomi once said made my eyes look nice. I arrive at the coffee shop 20 minutes early and order a tea I don't really want, sitting at a table by the window where I can see the parking lot. I practice what I want to say in my head, rehearsing lines about boundaries and needing to see sustained change over time. My tea gets cold while I wait and check my phone every 30 seconds. Joel walks in carrying a bouquet of daisies and my stomach drops. He spots me and smiles, walking over with the flowers extended like an offering. I take them automatically, too surprised to refuse, and he sits down across from me. He launches into an apology that sounds rehearsed, hitting all the right emotional notes about recognizing his mistakes and understanding my pain. The words are perfect, almost too perfect, and I find myself listening for something genuine underneath the performance. He talks about insights from therapy, using phrases that sound like they came straight from a self-help book. When I ask him what specifically he's learned about why he acted the way he did, his answer gets vague. He says something about childhood patterns and fear of vulnerability, but can't give concrete examples. I ask what he would do differently if we got back together, and he talks in generalities about being more present and appreciative. The The more he talks, the more I realize he's performing contrition, rather than actually feeling it. He knows what I want to hear, and he's saying it, but there's no real understanding behind the words. We've been talking for almost an hour when Joel reaches across the table for my hand. He asks for one more chance to prove he can be the partner I deserve, his fingers warm around mine. I look at his face and see the same expectant expression he always had when he wanted something from me. That look that assumed I would give in because I always had before. The sadness that washes over me isn't about losing him anymore, but about all the time I spent hoping he would become someone he never was, and probably never will be. I spent 5 years waiting for him to choose me first, to see me as worth the effort, and he only started trying when I was already gone. I pull my hand back gently and watch his expression shift from hopeful to confused. He starts to say something else, but I cut him off. I tell Joel clearly that I don't want to get back together, that too much has happened and I've moved on. My voice stays steady, even though my heart is pounding. I explain that I need someone who values me consistently, not just when they're afraid of losing me, and that I don't believe he's actually changed in any meaningful way. He tries to argue, but I stand up, leaving the daisies on the table between us. I walk out of the coffee shop and don't look back, half expecting him to follow me, but also hoping he won't. The grief pressing on my chest is real, but so is the relief flooding through me. He doesn't chase after me, and I'm glad, getting into my car and sitting there for a minute before starting the engine. I drive home feeling lighter than I have in months. 2 hours after I get home, my phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. I open it and see a message from Joel that's completely different from his careful email. He calls me ungrateful and selfish, says I'm going to regret throwing away what we had, that I'll never find anyone who puts up with me like he did. The words are vicious, and his sudden anger confirms everything I suspected about his apologetic performance. The mask has slipped completely, and this is who he really is underneath all the therapy talk and carefully chosen words. I read the text 3 times, feeling vindicated and sad at the same time. This is the Joel I actually know, the one who lashes out when he doesn't get what he wants, not the reformed man he was pretending to be in the coffee shop. I screenshot the angry text before blocking the new number, saving the image to a folder on my phone. Part of me wants to forward it to everyone who thought I overreacted about the breakup, to show them this is who he becomes when someone sets a boundary. I imagine sending it to his mother or Becca or Marco, watching them realize their version of Joel doesn't match reality. But I don't do it, closing my phone and setting it face down on the counter. I don't need to prove anything to people who didn't believe me in the first place, and getting into a public fight with Joel won't make me feel better. The screenshot is insurance in case he escalates, evidence that I'm not imagining things or being dramatic. I make myself a cup of tea and sit on my couch, feeling tired but also proud of myself for walking away when it would have been easier to give in. The week after I block Joel's new number, I sit in my apartment scrolling through my insurance website looking for therapists. I've been putting this off for months, telling myself I can handle everything on my own, but the screenshot of Joel's angry text sitting in my phone feels like proof I need help. I click through profiles of therapists who accept my insurance, reading their specialties and approaches, feeling overwhelmed by the options. Most of them have wait lists stretching weeks out, but one name catches my attention because she has an opening next Tuesday. Ramona McCarthy specializes in relationship trauma and has a kind face in her profile photo. I book the appointment before I can talk myself out of it. Tuesday comes faster than I expect, and I'm sitting in a small office with cream-colored walls and a brown couch that's softer than it looks. Ramona is maybe 50 with gray streaks in her dark hair and glasses that sit on a beaded chain around her neck. She asks me basic questions about what brings me in, and I feel exposed and stupid, like I should be able to fix my own problems without paying someone to listen. But she has this warm way of nodding and taking notes that makes me feel less judged. I tell her about the breakup in broad strokes, and she doesn't react with pity or shock, just asks follow-up questions that make me think harder about my answers. By the end of the 50 minutes, my shoulders feel less tight, and I schedule another appointment for the following week. At my second session, Ramona asks me to describe the relationship with Joel, and I realize I don't know where to start. There's so much history, 5 years of moments both good and bad, but what comes out of my mouth is the story about flowers. I tell her how he brought flowers to everyone except me, how he showed up with roses after the breakup like that would fix everything. She listens without interrupting and then asks what the flowers meant to me beyond just being flowers. The question catches me off guard because I haven't thought about it that way. I sit there quiet for a minute and then it hits me that the flowers represented being seen, being valued enough to receive a small gesture of care. Joel gave them to his mother and his friends and his coworkers, but never to me, and that pattern told me exactly where I ranked in his priorities. Ramona writes something in her notebook and asks why I stayed with someone who made me feel invisible. I don't have a good answer. We spend the rest of the session talking about self-worth and why I accepted so little for so long, and I leave feeling raw and uncomfortable. By my third session 2 weeks later, Ramona shifts the conversation to my relationship history before Joel. I tell her about my college boyfriend who had anger issues I thought I could fix, about the guy after that who was struggling financially and I supported for a year. As I'm talking, I hear the pattern in my own words, and it makes my stomach hurt. Ramona asks if I notice anything similar about these relationships, and I admit they all involved me trying to save or fix someone. She asks when that pattern started, and I trace it back to my early 20s, maybe even to high school if I'm honest. The realization that I've been doing this for over a decade hits me like a weight dropping on my chest. I leave therapy that day feeling worse than when I arrived, confronting truths about myself I'd rather ignore. The drive home is quiet, and I keep replaying the session in my head, seeing my choices in a new and unflattering light. 3 days later, I'm lying on my couch scrolling through Instagram when I see Joel tagged in a photo. My thumb hovers over the image before I click it, and suddenly I'm looking at him sitting across from a woman at a restaurant I recognize downtown. She's pretty with long dark hair and she's laughing at something, her hand near his on the table. The caption says dinner with this one and there's a heart emoji. I click on her profile and see her name is Crystal Wang. The jealousy that shoots through me is sharp and unexpected, making my chest feel tight. I tell myself I don't care who Joel dates, that I'm over him, but I can't stop scrolling through her photos. She works in marketing, likes hiking, has a lot of friends based on the group shots. In one recent photo, Joel's in the background at what looks like a party. I zoom in on his face and feel stupid for doing it. For the next 3 days, I check Crystal's Instagram obsessively. I compare her life to mine, her appearance to mine, looking for ways she's better or worse than me. I analyze every photo Joel appears in, studying his expression and body language for clues about how serious they are. In one photo posted yesterday, there are pink tulips in a vase on her kitchen counter, and she's tagged Joel thanking him for the flowers. The familiar hurt surfaces immediately, that same feeling of being the only person Joel wouldn't give flowers to. I know this behavior is unhealthy, that I'm torturing myself for no reason, but I keep going back to her profile. I refresh it multiple times a day to see if there are new posts. I'm aware I've fallen down a rabbit hole, but I can't seem to climb out. Naomi and I are having lunch in the hospital cafeteria when she glances at my phone and sees Crystal's Instagram open. She reaches across the table and gently turns my phone face down, giving me a look that's more concerned than judgmental. I get defensive immediately, saying I was just checking something, that it's not a big deal. Naomi doesn't buy it and asks how long I've been stalking Joel's new girlfriend. Hearing it said out loud makes me feel ashamed, and I admit it's been a few days. She asks if it's making me feel better or worse, and I have to confess it's making me feel terrible. Naomi suggests I delete the apps for a while, just to give myself a break from the constant access. I resist the idea, coming up with excuses about needing social media for other things, but her expression tells me she sees right through me. She doesn't push harder, just squeezes my hand and says she's worried about me. I promise I'll think about it. That night, I sit on my couch with my phone in my hands, Instagram open to Crystal's profile again. I've looked at the same photos, so many times I have them memorized. My finger hovers over the app icon, and I think about what Naomi said, about how this is making me miserable instead of better. I close Instagram and go to my settings, finding the app in my list of downloads. Deleting it feels like cutting off a limb, like I'm losing access to something essential even though I know it's poison. My hands shake as I press delete and watch the app disappear. Then I delete Facebook and Twitter too, removing all the ways I can easily check on Joel and Crystal. The urge to reinstall them immediately is so strong I have to put my phone in another room. I text Naomi that I did it, and she sends back a proud face emoji and a heart. I sit with the discomfort, feeling like I'm crawling out of my skin, but I don't reinstall the apps. Work gets harder over the following weeks because we're short-staffed and I keep volunteering for extra shifts. I tell myself it's about the money, but really it's about avoiding being alone with my thoughts. During a busy overnight shift, I'm preparing medications for my patients, and I grab the wrong dosage of blood pressure medication for a patient in room 12. I catch it myself before administering it, but just barely, and the near miss shakes me badly. I have to sit in the supply closet for 5 minutes trying to calm down, thinking about what could have happened if I hadn't noticed. The pharmacist who double-checks my correction gives me a concerned look but doesn't say anything. I finish my shift feeling like I'm barely holding it together, wondering if I'm too messed up to be responsible for patient care. The thought of leaving nursing crosses my mind seriously for the first time. 2 days after the medication error, my nurse manager Janelle pulls me aside during my break and asks if we can talk in her office. I know what's coming and my stomach drops as I follow her down the hall. She closes the door and asks what's going on with me lately, mentioning the near miss and the fact that I've been picking up excessive overtime. Something about her gentle tone breaks through my defenses, and I start crying before I can stop myself. I tell her everything, about Joel and the breakup, and how I've been obsessively checking social media and feeling like I'm falling apart. The words pour out in a jumbled mess, and I'm embarrassed to be crying in front of my boss, but Janelle just hands me tissues and listens. When I finish, she says she's glad I told her and suggests I take some personal leave to get myself together. She says the hospital offers 2 weeks of personal time separate from vacation, and that I clearly need it. I feel like I'm giving up by taking leave, like I'm admitting defeat, but I also know she's right. I submit the paperwork for 2 weeks of personal leave that afternoon, filling out forms in HR while fighting back more tears. The HR person processes everything quickly and tells me my leave starts after my next scheduled shift in 3 days. My last shift before leave is a 12-hour day that feels endless. Every task taking more energy than it should. I make it through without any errors, but I'm completely drained by the time I clock out. In my car in the parking garage, I sit behind the wheel and cry harder than I have in months. My whole body's shaking with sobs. The idea of 2 weeks with nothing but my own thoughts waiting at home terrifies me more than staying busy ever did. The first week of leave, I crawl into bed on Monday morning and don't get up until Tuesday afternoon. My body feels like it weighs 1,000 pounds. I sleep through entire days, waking only to use the bathroom or drink water from the tap. The apartment stays dark because I don't bother opening the blinds. On Wednesday, I manage to eat half a granola bar before my stomach turns, and I go back to bed. Thursday blurs into Friday. I wake up at odd hours, 3 in the morning or noon, and can't tell which day it is anymore. My phone sits on the nightstand with dozens of unread messages I can't bring myself to check. The silence in the apartment presses against my ears until I want to scream, but I don't have the energy for that either. When I'm awake, I lie on the couch staring at the ceiling and feeling nothing, which somehow feels worse than feeling sad. I've been running from this emptiness for months, filling every hour with work and distractions, and now there's nowhere left to run. On day 5, I wake up thinking about my grandmother. I haven't been to her grave since the funeral 2 years ago, when I stood next to Joel and felt completely alone even with his arm around me. I get dressed for the first time in days, pulling on jeans that hang looser than they should. At the grocery store, I buy white carnations because I can't remember what flowers she liked. The cemetery is on the edge of town, past the strip malls and into the area where the roads get narrower. I park near the office building and walk through the rows of headstones, getting lost twice before I find her section. Her grave is in the 3rd row, marked by a simple granite stone with her name and dates. Someone has left a small American flag near the marker, probably from Memorial Day months ago. I set the carnations down and stand there waiting to feel something. The grief that comes isn't just about losing her. It's about Joel not being there when I needed him, about him checking his phone during the funeral reception, about him saying we should leave early because he had plans with friends. I lost my grandmother, and my boyfriend couldn't even pretend to care for one full day. The crying starts without warning. One minute I'm standing there dry-eyed. The next I'm sobbing so hard I can barely breathe. I cry for my grandmother who raised me every summer when my parents worked. I cry for my marriage that was broken from the start. I cry for all the years I spent making myself smaller and quieter and less demanding. My legs give out and I end up sitting on the ground next to her headstone, grass staining my jeans. The sobs tear out of me in waves that won't stop. My chest hurts and my throat burns and I can't catch my breath, but I can't stop crying either. A groundskeeper drives past on a riding mower and pretends not to see me falling apart. I press my forehead against the cool granite and let myself break completely. The first real breakdown since I left Joel. Everything I've been holding back for months comes pouring out until I'm empty. I pull out my phone with shaking hands and call Naomi. She answers on the second ring and I can barely get words out through the crying. I tell her where I am, that I'm at my grandmother's grave, and I can't stop crying, and I don't want to be alone. She doesn't ask questions, just listens to me sob and talk in broken sentences about my grandmother and Joel, and feeling like I wasted so much time. She offers to come get me, but I tell her I'm okay. I just needed to hear a friendly voice. We stay on the phone for 20 minutes while I gradually calm down. She tells me to drive home safe and text her when I get there. After we hang up, I sit with my grandmother for another hour, feeling wrung out, but somehow lighter. Naomi shows up at my apartment the next evening carrying Thai food and a bottle of wine. We eat on my couch with the containers spread across the coffee table, and she asks how I'm doing after yesterday. I tell her I'm embarrassed about the phone call, about breaking down like that. She waves it off and says she's done the same thing more times than she can count. Then she starts talking about her own breakup from her 7-year relationship, details she's never shared before. She tells me about the emotional neglect she experienced, how her ex would give her the silent treatment for days over minor disagreements, how he'd make plans with friends and tell her about them after the fact, never thinking to include her, how she felt invisible in her own relationship, like she was just there to cook and clean and provide sex when he wanted it. She says it took her a year after the breakup to recognize it as abuse because he never hit her or called her names. Hearing her story makes something click in my head about my own situation. Joel never degraded me the way my ex-husband did, but the pattern of being last priority, of being taken for granted, it's the same thing. We talk until midnight and she crashes on my couch. Having her there makes the apartment feel less empty. I start journaling the next morning after Naomi leaves. I dig out an old notebook from a drawer and sit at my kitchen table with coffee. The first entry feels awkward and forced, writing about what I want from life like I'm filling out a questionnaire. I write about wanting to feel valued and immediately cross it out because it sounds stupid. But I make myself keep going. I write about wanting partnership instead of being someone's caretaker. About wanting someone who chooses me first instead of last. About wanting to feel seen and heard and important. The exercise feels silly, but I keep at it every morning. By the third day, it starts feeling less forced. I write about career goals I put aside during my marriage. About friendships I want to rebuild. About the kind of person I want to become instead of the person I've been settling for being. The clarity comes slowly, but it comes. Marco calls me 2 weeks into my leave, his name popping up on my phone while I'm making lunch. I almost don't answer, but curiosity wins. He starts off awkward, asking how I'm doing, and I can tell he's working up to something. Finally, he admits that Joel and Crystal are already having problems. Joel keeps comparing her to me, apparently, telling Crystal she doesn't understand him the way I did. Marco sounds uncomfortable sharing this, and I wonder if Joel asked him to call or if he's doing it on his own. The information gives me a dark satisfaction at first, proof that Joel hasn't changed at all. But then I feel sorry for Crystal, knowing she's going through what I went through. I tell Marco I appreciate him letting me know, but I'm not interested in Joel's relationship drama. After we hang up, I sit with what he told me, waiting for the hope to surface that maybe Joel will come back, but it doesn't come. I realize I don't want him back even if he became available, and that feels like crossing some important line. I write about it in my journal the next morning. I don't want Joel back. I underline it 3 times, pressing the pen hard into the paper. The certainty surprises me because for months I've been afraid I'd weaken if he tried hard enough to win me back. But something has shifted. I don't miss him anymore. I miss the version of him I kept hoping he'd become, the husband I imagined he could be if he just tried harder. That person never existed. Joel is who he is, and who he is wasn't enough for me. Writing it down makes it real in a way thinking it never did. Going back to work after my leave feels different, like I'm showing up as a slightly different version of myself. The hospital looks the same, smells the same, sounds the same, but I feel changed somehow. During my second shift back, a doctor I've worked with for years tries to dismiss a patient concern I bring up. Normally I'd let it go, defer to his judgment even when my gut says something's wrong. This time I speak up, firmly but professionally, explaining why I think the patient needs additional monitoring. My hands shake while I'm talking and my voice wavers, but I don't back down. He looks surprised but agrees to order the tests I suggested. Afterward, I hide in the supply closet for 5 minutes, adrenaline making my heart race. But I also feel proud of myself for not backing down. A week later, Janelle pulls me aside during shift change about the schedule. She starts to tell me I'm assigned a double shift on Thursday, and I interrupt her before I can lose my nerve. I tell her I can't work another double, that I need to protect my mental health. The words come out rushed and defensive like I'm expecting a fight, but Janelle just nods and says she'll find someone else to cover it. She tells me she's glad I'm setting boundaries, that she was worried about me burning out. I leave the conversation feeling stunned. Setting boundaries doesn't always result in punishment. People respect you more when you respect yourself. It's such a simple concept, but it feels revolutionary. Eric shows up at the nurse's station during my shift the following week with a coffee in each hand, one for him, and one that he sets down next to my charting computer without saying anything. I glance at it and see he's written my name on the cup in marker, spelled correctly, which means he asked someone how I take my coffee. The gesture makes my stomach flip in a way I don't know how to process. He leans against the counter and asks how my shift is going, making small talk about a difficult patient we both dealt with yesterday, and I find myself relaxing into the conversation despite my nerves. When he leaves to check on a patient in the ICU, I stare at the coffee cup for a full minute before taking a sip. It's exactly how I like it. 2 sugars and cream, and the fact that he paid attention to that detail feels significant in a way I'm not ready to examine. Naomi appears at my elbow during lunch break and raises her eyebrows at the coffee cup I'm still carrying around. She tells me Eric has been asking about me, wanting to know if I'm seeing anyone, and the panic that floods through me is immediate and overwhelming. I set down my sandwich and tell her I can't do this, that I'm not ready for anyone to be interested in me, that the whole thing makes me want to hide in the supply closet. She gives me this knowing look and says Eric seems like a good guy, that maybe I should give him a chance, but I shake my head before she finishes the sentence. The thought of dating anyone right now makes my chest feel tight and my palms start sweating. I spend the rest of my shift hyper-aware of where Eric is on the floor, timing my break so I don't run into him in the hallway or the break room. When I see him heading toward the nurse's station, I suddenly remember I need to check on a patient on the opposite end of the unit. It's ridiculous behavior and I know it, but I can't seem to stop myself from avoiding him. The next few days, I volunteer for assignments on different floors, telling Janelle I want to expand my skills, but really just trying to put physical distance between Eric and me. I pick up a shift in the cardiac unit and another in pediatrics, anywhere that keeps me away from the respiratory patients that would require me to work with him. On Thursday, I'm restocking supplies in a storage room when I hear his voice in the hallway asking another nurse if she's seen me, and I actually press myself against the wall until he walks past. The guilt hits me immediately because Eric hasn't done anything wrong, hasn't pushed or made me uncomfortable, has only been kind and thoughtful with his coffee delivery and easy conversation. But every time I think about facing him, my throat gets tight and I feel like I might throw up. During a rare quiet moment, I sit in my car during break and try to figure out what I'm so afraid of. The answer comes quickly. Too quickly. Like it's been waiting just under the surface. I'm terrified of making the same mistakes, of choosing someone who will make me feel invisible again, of losing myself in another relationship where I come last. The fear is so strong it makes my hands shake on the steering wheel. I know I'm being unfair to Eric, projecting Joel's failures onto someone who hasn't earned that suspicion, but knowing it doesn't make the anxiety go away. When my shift ends, I see Eric's car still in the parking lot, and I wait 15 minutes in my vehicle until he leaves, then feel pathetic for hiding like a teenager avoiding their ex. I bring up Eric in my next therapy session with Ramona, admitting that I've been actively avoiding a coworker who seems interested in me. She asks what I'm afraid of, and I tell her the truth, that I'm scared of repeating the same patterns, of choosing someone who won't value me, of losing myself again in someone else's needs and wants. Ramona nods like she expected this answer and asks me what evidence I have that Eric would treat me the way Joel did. I open my mouth to respond and realize I don't have any evidence, that I'm operating purely on fear rather than facts. She points out that avoiding all connection isn't the answer, that I can't protect myself from potential hurt by refusing to let anyone get close. I argue that I'm just not ready, that it's too soon after Joel, that I need more time to work on myself first. Ramona gives me this gentle but firm look and tells me that there's a difference between taking time to heal and using healing as an excuse to hide from life. Her words sting because they're true, and I sit with the discomfort for the rest of the session. She doesn't tell me I have to date Eric or give him a chance, just suggests that I consider what I'm really afraid of, and whether avoiding him is actually protecting me or just keeping me stuck. I leave her office feeling unsettled and defensive, not convinced I'm ready to risk opening myself up to anyone new. Eric catches me in the break room 3 days later, walking in just as I'm pouring coffee and blocking my exit route to the door. He asks if he did something to upset me, and his directness catches me completely off guard. I stammer something about being busy with work, but he cuts me off gently and says I've been avoiding him, and he'd like to know why. The kindness in his voice disarms me completely, and I find myself telling him the truth, that I recently got out of a long relationship, and I'm not in a place to date anyone. He nods slowly and leans against the counter, then tells me he's not trying to pressure me into anything, that he just enjoys talking to me. We end up sitting at the break room table, and he shares his own divorce story, about how his ex-wife left him 2 years ago, and how long it took him to feel like himself again. He talks about his teenage daughters and how they helped him through the worst of it, and I find myself relaxing as I listen. His openness makes me feel less alone in my mess, less broken for still struggling months after my breakup. When my break ends, I leave feeling less anxious about him, like maybe we can just be friendly coworkers without all the weight I've been putting on every interaction. He doesn't ask for my number or suggest we hang out, just tells me he's glad we talked, and the lack of pressure makes me breathe easier. That evening, I'm scrolling through Instagram, which I reinstalled last week against my better judgment, when a message request pops up from Crystal Wang. My first instinct is to decline it and pretend I never saw it, but something makes me click on the notification. She's asking if we can talk about Joel, saying she has some questions and doesn't know who else to ask. I stare at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the decline button. Part of me wants nothing to do with Joel's new relationship, wants to stay as far away from that mess as possible. But I remember the desperate edge to her question, and recognize it because I've been there, asking friends and family if Joel's behavior was normal, if I was overreacting, if I should just try harder to make him happy. I type out a response saying I'm willing to talk and hit send before I can change my mind. She responds immediately, thanking me and asking if Joel was always so dismissive of her feelings, if he ever made me feel like I was asking for too much when I wanted basic consideration. The questions hit me hard because they're the exact same ones I asked myself for years. I tell her I need some time to think about how to respond and close the app, my heart racing. I spend the next 2 days debating whether to tell Crystal the truth about Joel's pattern of emotional neglect. Part of me wants to warn her so she doesn't waste years like I did, so she doesn't end up sitting in a therapist's office trying to rebuild her sense of self after giving everything to someone who gave nothing back. But another part thinks she needs to figure it out herself, that me interfering will only cause drama, and maybe push her closer to Joel out of defensiveness. I bring it up with Ramona during our next session, and she asks me to consider my motivations. Am I trying to help Crystal, or am I trying to get back at Joel by sabotaging his new relationship? The question makes me uncomfortable because I'm not entirely sure of the answer. I think about it for the rest of the session, and realize that while there's definitely some satisfaction in the idea of Joel's pattern catching up with him, mostly I just don't want Crystal to go through what I went through. Ramona tells me the choice is mine, but warns me to be prepared for whatever consequences come from getting involved. She points out that Crystal might not believe me, might tell Joel I reached out, might turn the whole thing into more drama than it's worth. I leave therapy still uncertain but leaning toward responding to Crystal's message. On Saturday morning, I sit down with my laptop and compose a message to Crystal, writing and deleting it 4 times before settling on something brief and honest. I tell her that Joel showed me through his actions that I wasn't a priority, that he was consistently thoughtful and generous with everyone except me, that I spent 5 years hoping he would change and he never did. I write that she should trust her instincts about whether he's treating her the same way, that if she's already asking these questions, then she probably knows the answer. I read it over 3 times, making sure I'm not being vindictive or dramatic, just truthful. Then I hit send and immediately block her before she can respond, before Joel can find out I talked to her, before I can get dragged into whatever happens next. The relief is immediate and surprising. I feel good about offering help without getting sucked into their drama, about speaking my truth without needing to stick around for the fallout. 2 days later, I'm at the nurse's station when my work phone rings with an internal extension I don't recognize. I answer and hear Joel's voice, venomous and angry, and my whole body goes rigid. He's somehow gotten my work number and he's accusing me of sabotaging his relationship, calling me bitter and jealous and pathetic. His voice rises as he talks, and I can hear the rage underneath his words. The same rage that used to make me back down and apologize for things that weren't my fault. He tells me I'm trying to ruin his happiness because I can't stand to see him move on. That Crystal showed him my message and now she's questioning everything about their relationship. I listen without saying anything, my hand gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turn white. He calls me bitter 3 more times before I hang up on him mid-sentence. My hands are shaking, but I'm not scared, just annoyed that he's still trying to make me responsible for his problems. I immediately call the phone system back and figure out how to save the voicemail he left before calling, preserving his angry rant as evidence. The old me would have felt guilty, would have wondered if I did something wrong by talking to Crystal. But now I just feel irritated that he's still trying to control the narrative. The next morning, I make an appointment with HR and bring my phone with Joel's saved voicemail. The representative, a woman named Sandra, listens to the recording with an increasingly serious expression. I explain our history, the breakup, his pattern of boundary violations, and now this harassment at my workplace. Sandra takes notes and asks if I feel unsafe, if Joel knows where I work, if he's made any threats beyond the angry voicemail. I tell her I don't think he'll show up here, but I want the incident documented in case he escalates. She assures me they take harassment seriously and asks if I want to pursue a no-contact order through the courts. I decline for now, saying I just want it on record, but I appreciate her taking it seriously. She makes copies of everything and tells me to contact her immediately if Joel reaches out again. Walking out of her office, I feel relieved to have the incident officially documented, to have someone in authority acknowledge that his behavior is inappropriate. 3 days pass without any contact from Joel, and I start to relax back into my normal routine. I'm charting at the nurse's station when Eric walks up and asks if I want to get coffee sometime outside of work. He's careful to make it clear he means as a date, not just coworkers hanging out, giving me the option to say no without ambiguity. I'm surprised to find myself saying yes before I've really thought about it, curious about spending time with someone who seems genuinely kind and respectful. We make plans for the following Saturday, and he suggests a coffee shop downtown that I've never been to. After he walks away, I stand there feeling nervous but not panicked, which feels like progress. Naomi appears at my elbow and grins at me, clearly having overheard the whole exchange, and I tell her to shut up before she can say anything. But I'm smiling when I say it, and she just laughs and goes back to her charting. Saturday morning, I stand in front of my closet for 20 minutes trying to pick an outfit for coffee with Eric, changing my shirt 3 times before settling on something casual that doesn't look like I tried too hard. I arrive at the downtown coffee shop 10 minutes early and sit in my car rehearsing how to act normal, my palms sweating against the steering wheel. When Eric walks up and waves through my windshield, I take a breath and get out, forcing myself to smile. Inside, we order drinks and find a corner table, and the conversation flows easier than I expected. He tells me about his 2 teenage daughters and their constant drama over borrowed clothes and bathroom time, acting out their arguments with different voices that make me laugh so hard I snort into my latte. He shares a story about his youngest getting caught sneaking out to meet a boy, and how he handled it by making her watch him install a motion sensor on her bedroom window. The way he talks about his kids is warm and self-deprecating, nothing like Joel's constant need to be impressive. An hour passes, then 2, and I realize I haven't checked my phone once or worried about what to say next. When we finally leave, he walks me to my car in the parking lot, and the afternoon sun makes me squint as I fumble for my keys. He stands close, closer than necessary, and I can smell his cologne mixed with coffee. The moment stretches out, and I see him lean in slightly, his intention clear, and panic floods my chest. I take a step back, my shoulder bumping against my car door, and the disappointment on his face mirrors what I feel inside. I'm not ready for this, not for kissing or touching or any kind of physical closeness, and the realization makes me want to cry. I drove here thinking maybe I was healed enough for this, that 10 months was long enough to get past what Joel did to me, but my body knows better than my brain. I force myself to look at Eric instead of at my shoes, my throat tight with embarrassment. The words come out clumsy and honest, telling him I had a good time but I'm not ready to date seriously, that I'm still working through stuff from my last relationship. I brace for anger or hurt feelings, for him to call me a tease or accuse me of wasting his time, but he just nods and his expression stays kind. He says he appreciates my honesty, and suggests we could hang out as friends if I want. No pressure either way. The relief that washes over me is so strong my knees feel weak, and I realize how much I expected him to react like Joel would have. I tell him yes, friends sounds good, and he smiles before heading to his own car. Driving home, I feel proud of myself for being honest, but also frustrated that I'm still so broken, that a nice moment with a good person sent me into panic mode. I call Naomi when I get back to my apartment and tell her what happened, and she reminds me that healing isn't linear, that I'm doing better than I think I am. Over the next few weeks, Eric and I fall into an easy pattern of having lunch together at work a couple times a week. We eat in the cafeteria or sometimes grab sandwiches from the deli across the street, talking about our shifts and complaining about difficult doctors and sharing funny patient stories. He never brings up the failed kiss or asks when I might be ready for more, just shows up as a friend who makes me laugh and listens when I need to vent. One afternoon, a surgeon yells at me in front of everyone at the nurse's station over a chart I supposedly misfiled, and Eric appears at my elbow 10 minutes later with a candy bar from the vending machine. He doesn't say anything profound, just sits with me during my break while I eat chocolate and calm down. Having a man in my life who treats me with basic respect and kindness, who doesn't demand anything or make me feel small, feels strange and revolutionary. I catch myself comparing him to Joel constantly, noticing all the ways Eric's behavior is different, and I start to understand that what I accepted as normal for 5 years was actually terrible. I stop at the grocery store on my way home from work one evening, planning to grab milk and bread, and end up standing in front of the flower display near the entrance. The sunflowers catch my eye, bright yellow and full, the same kind Joel bought for Becca during our breakup. For a second, the memory stings, but then something shifts and I think, why shouldn't I have flowers too? I grab a bouquet and add it to my cart, feeling slightly ridiculous but also determined. At home, I find a vase under my sink and arrange the sunflowers on my kitchen table, stepping back to look at them. They make the whole room feel brighter, more alive, and I smile at how such a small thing can change the feel of a space. I take a picture and send it to Naomi with the caption, "Bought these for myself," and she responds with 3 fire emojis and the words, "That's my girl." I sit at my table eating leftover pasta and looking at the flowers, and something about this moment feels significant, like I'm finally learning to give myself the things I used to wait for other people to provide. 10 months after throwing Joel's dead roses in the dumpster, I'm getting ready for a shift when I realize my life looks completely different now. I have Naomi and 2 other nurses from work who I meet up with outside the hospital, going to movies or trying new restaurants or just hanging out at each other's apartments. I stopped picking up every extra shift offered to me and started using my time off to actually rest instead of just avoiding my thoughts. I joined a book club that Naomi recommended and started going to yoga classes on Sunday mornings. Small things that make me feel like I'm building a life instead of just surviving one. My apartment has plants now and art on the walls and doesn't feel like a temporary hiding place anymore. I still see Ramona every other week and we talk about patterns I'm noticing in myself, ways I make myself small or apologize for things that aren't my fault. The progress feels slow and sometimes I still have bad days where I miss what I thought Joel and I had, but mostly I feel more like myself than I have in years. I'm learning what I actually want instead of what I think I should want, and the difference between those 2 things turns out to be huge. Naomi and I are charting side by side at the nurse's station when she mentions casually that she heard Joel and Crystal broke up. I wait for jealousy or satisfaction or hurt to surface, some kind of feeling about my ex-boyfriend being single again, but there's only mild curiosity. I don't ask how Naomi heard or what happened between them, just make a non-committal sound and change the subject to her upcoming beach vacation with her sister. She gives me a knowing look but doesn't push, and we spend the rest of our break talking about whether she should get a new swimsuit or just wear last year's. Later, driving home, I think about how genuinely I didn't care about Joel's relationship status, and it feels like crossing some kind of threshold. For months, every piece of information about him would send me spiraling, but now he's becoming background noise, someone I used to know who doesn't matter to my current life. I go 4 full days without thinking about Joel at all, and when I realize it on the 5th day, I feel quietly triumphant. For so long after the breakup, he occupied constant space in my head even in his absence, and I would catch myself wondering what he was doing, or imagining conversations we might have, or replaying old arguments. But this week I've been too busy with work and my book club meeting and planning a hiking trip with Naomi to spare him any mental energy. He's becoming irrelevant, fading into the category of people I used to know, and the freedom of that feels massive. I'm building a life where Joel is just a chapter that's closed, not the whole story, and I'm the main character again instead of a supporting role in someone else's narrative. The 1-year anniversary of our breakup falls on a Tuesday, and I mark it privately in my journal that morning before work. I write about how different I feel now compared to the numb woman who threw away dead roses and couldn't imagine feeling anything again. I'm not completely healed, and I know I still have work to do, patterns to unlearn, and walls to keep dismantling, but I'm proud of how far I've come. I write about the sunflowers on my kitchen table and my friendship with Eric, and the fact that I can go days without thinking about Joel. I write about learning to value myself enough to walk away from someone who made me feel worthless, and about building a support system that actually supports me. When I finish writing, I close the journal and put it back on my night shelf, and it feels like closing a book on that chapter of my life. That weekend, I celebrate the anniversary with Naomi and 2 other nurses from work, meeting at a restaurant downtown for dinner and drinks. We order too much food and split everything, laughing over stories from our week and debating whether our new charge nurse is actually competent or just good at faking it. Nobody mentions my breakup or asks how I'm doing in that careful way people did for months, and I realize we're just 4 friends having a normal night out. The conversation flows easily, jumping from work drama to vacation plans to a terrible movie one of them watched, and I feel grateful for these friendships that I built myself. These connections feel solid and reciprocal in ways my relationship with Joel never was, built on actual care and respect, instead of me constantly trying to earn someone's attention. Monday at work, Eric finds me during lunch and asks my advice about a good restaurant because he has a date this weekend. My first reaction is genuine happiness for him. No jealousy or possessiveness, just hoping it goes well. I suggest my favorite Italian place downtown, the one with the outdoor seating and amazing pasta, and give him tips about what to order. He thanks me and seems nervous in a sweet way, mentioning that he hasn't dated much since his divorce. After he leaves, I sit with my sandwich feeling good about the fact that I can be friends with an attractive man without needing it to become romantic. The friendship we've built feels valuable on its own, not like a consolation prize or a failure, and my ability to be happy for him feels like real growth. I schedule my appointment with Ramona for Thursday afternoon, and when I arrive at her office, she has that look she gets when we're about to talk about something important. We settle into our usual spots and she asks how I've been feeling lately, and I tell her honestly that I feel ready for something new. The idea of dating doesn't scare me anymore. It just seems like something I might want to explore when I feel like it. I mention thinking about trying one of those dating apps, not because I'm desperate to find someone, but because I'm curious about meeting new people. Ramona smiles and points out how different my mindset is now compared to when we first started therapy. She says I used to talk about relationships like I needed to prove my worth or fix someone, but now I'm talking about partnership and adding to my life instead of filling a hole. We agree this will probably be my last regular session, though I can always come back if I need to. I leave her office feeling lighter, like I just closed a chapter I've been writing for over a year. The next morning, I stop at the grocery store on my way home from a shift and buy myself a bouquet of pink roses, the kind with the tight buds that will open over the next few days. I arrange them in the blue vase on my kitchen table, stepping back to admire how they look in the afternoon light coming through the window. I've been buying myself flowers every week now, different kinds each time, and my apartment always has fresh blooms somewhere. Life isn't perfect, and I still have moments where I feel lonely or wonder if I made the right choices, but I finally understand that I'm enough all on my own. Anyone I let into my life from here on out needs to add to what I've built, not take from it.